talk about K through 5 science. The first part of the training is an overview, and then we'll dig into the 4th grade stuff specifically. We'll do a little quick activity. Just we've got some emojis here. Think about something you've done this summer that fits one of the prompts or the faces listed. So it could be a what, a wow, a whoa, or a we. And take turns at your table and say the prompt or make the face.
I want you guys to make the face.
Especially with the X's for the eyes.
Just for this activity.
And then share your summer experience that fits it. So I'll do wow because I went to Mount Rushmore a couple weeks ago with my family, and it was, I knew it was a pretty amazing landmark, but when you get like that close to it and it's just wow. So that was my summer.
Mine was a wow and a whoa. I just got back from a cruise, and my whole family went. So there's 14 little kids, and they knew we were on that ship. So.
You had 14 children, John?
Yeah, there's what my brothers and
joking.
sisters. I don't have 14. No way.
So you've been busy.
I only have 2.
So we'll do a couple, just like 2 minutes of sharing at your table. So here's just a quote from the Next Generation Science Standards. Really, we're just really focusing on how science is a really important part of the elementary school experience. And we really need to put our focus not just on reading and math, but on science and social studies too. And Nell Duke is a literacy expert, and this is a quote from her: "I am a literacy scholar asking the field to devote more time to science and social studies." And we're going to show a short clip. We're not going to watch the whole video from her, but she gives some, that goes more in depth into what she means by it.
Hi, I'm Nell Duke. I'm a professor at the University of Michigan in Literacy, Language, and Culture, and in the combined program in Education and Psychology. My work focuses on early literacy development, particularly among children living in poverty. Today I'm here to talk with you about speaking up for science and social studies education. There's been an enormous decline in the United States in science and social studies education at the elementary level. At least since No Child Left Behind, and arguably before that, U.S. elementary schools have been spending more time on English language arts, more time on math, less time on science, and less time on social studies. These changes don't appear to be randomly distributed. Rather, it's children of poverty who are more likely to spend more time on math and on English language arts, and relatively less time on science and on social studies. This is problematic. If we think about what this means long term, it means that our citizens who are budding citizens, who are of lower socioeconomic status, are getting less opportunity to learn about things like how our government works, to learn about environmental science, to be able to process the kinds of information that one needs to recognize the environmental racism that occurs in our country. There is a stratification going on when we allow some children in our society to learn much more about science and social studies than we enable other children in our society to learn. We need to do something about the situation. This decline in time spent on science and social studies education at the elementary level in the United States is going to be detrimental to science learning. We can assume that if less curricular time is devoted to science in the elementary grades, kids are going to have lower science achievement than they would. And in fact, there is some data from the National Assessment of Educational Progress, for example, that sees a relationship between the amount of time that's reported to be spent on science education and students' science achievement. We can make the same assumption about social studies. Kids will leave elementary school in the U.S. knowing less about social studies, having fewer social studies process skills if they have spent their elementary career almost exclusively on English language arts and math to the exclusion of science and social studies. But I'm arguing that this decline of attention to science and social studies is also detrimental to literacy learning. That is, that literacy actually requires, in the long term, strong understanding, knowledge of the world, It requires students to know the things that authors assume they know. And so if we don't have that in place, we don't have all that vocabulary knowledge that goes with it in that place, if we haven't developed students' ability to read and write inside science and social studies disciplines, then we're actually going to have long-term pain. So it may seem like in the short term, we're going to raise literacy and math achievement by spending so much time on literacy and math, but in the long term, we're going to pay for the system that we've developed. So I'm a literacy scholar. My focus is on helping U.S. kids learn reading, writing, and other literacy skills, and I am asking the field to devote more time to science and social studies education at the elementary level. I'm going to offer 3 reasons why I'm making this plea, even as a literacy scholar. The first is that science and social studies knowledge, as I've already suggested, significantly affect reading and writing. The second is that science and social studies actually provide a very compelling context for literacy education. And the third argument I'm going to make is that reading and writing and other literacy practices are actually an integral part of the practice of science and social studies. And therefore, they're as much the clients of literacy education as they are benefiting from it. I would like to use this thought experiment to begin the first point. So if you would just read this passage and try to comprehend it. My guess is that most of you anyway, had difficulty comprehending this passage. It wasn't that you couldn't read the words that are in the passage fluently, but rather that overall you couldn't construct much meaning with this passage. This is because the passage is about cricket. And I'm told if you know about cricket, then this is an easy passage to understand. But if you don't know about cricket, it's a difficult passage to understand. And it's just a sort of proof of concept that, in fact, if you lack relevant knowledge related to what you're reading, it can be very difficult to comprehend it. That is, comprehension depends in part on your knowledge related to the text. Now, this supports, in one way, this point that science and social studies knowledge actually affects reading and writing achievement. And there are many, many studies that suggest that this is in fact the case. One that's often cited, I've been citing it for years, is the Recht-and-Leslie study. And in this study, they put together a sample of students who were either good readers or poor readers as measured by a typical norm reference standardized test of reading achievement. Some of the students in this sample were students who knew quite a lot about baseball, and others were students who didn't know much about baseball. And they made sure that the knowledge was distributed across each of the groups, good and poor readers. So you had good readers who knew a lot about baseball, you had good readers who didn't know a lot about baseball, poor readers who knew a lot about baseball, and poor readers who did not know a lot about baseball. Then all of the students were asked to read a passage that described about half an inning of a baseball game. And they had a measure of their comprehension of that passage. It involved reenacting and also describing what they had just read. What they found in this study was that the poor readers, based on that norm reference standardized test of reading achievement, the poor readers who knew a lot about baseball actually had higher comprehension than the good readers who knew very little about baseball. What this study suggests is simply the power of world knowledge, that it's so powerful that it even rivaled, in this case, just general reading achievement in terms of affecting the comprehension of a passage. Now, this is one study, but there are really many others. For example, Priebe, Miller, and Keenan have a study that has very similar findings that was done much more recently. And there's also lots of research that shows in different ways the ways in which how much world knowledge you have predicts long-term reading achievement. So there's lots of reason to think that reading comprehension is highly affected by one's world knowledge. Although there's less research in writing, there's also some there that suggests that topic knowledge, how much you know about the topic you're writing about, has an impact on the quality of that writing. So even in the domain of writing, we can make an argument that science and social studies knowledge is important to literacy achievement. There are a number of reasons why we think that knowledge related to a passage is so influential on reading achievement, and I'm going to share some of those with you. So one way that knowledge is really helpful is in terms of processing vocabulary. So you can just handle vocabulary that you encounter when you have more conceptual knowledge, and of course you know more of the vocabulary. And thinking back to the example I gave with the cricket match, you can imagine that if you knew all of that information about cricket, and in particular if you knew those vocabulary words, the passage would have been easier for you to understand. We also have some evidence to suggest that more world knowledge actually allows you to handle new vocabulary better. So even if you don't know the words in the passage or in what you're reading, if you have high background knowledge, high knowledge relative to what you're reading, you'll be able to manage the new vocabulary you encounter more effectively. There's also evidence that inference generation, the sort of reading between the lines that we all have to do in order to comprehend, goes better when we have more relevant prior knowledge. We also have some indication that the ability to handle incoherence in text, or to handle texts that are not as well written as we would like, is stronger when we have more relevant background knowledge. And finally, the whole process of comprehension, for example, in Kinch's model, in which we create a text space and then a situation model when we are, or along with a situation model while we're comprehending, that process is facilitated by stronger relevant world knowledge relevant to the passage at hand. So I've talked about why reading comprehension and even writing are highly affected by the world knowledge that you possess, and in particular, knowledge in science and social studies. A second reason why, as a literacy scholar, I'm asking for more attention to science and social studies in the elementary grades is that science and social studies provide a really compelling context for reading and writing education, for literacy education. Now,
We're going to stop there, but that's kind of gives what we are kind of hoping that the science units give a lot of background knowledge that will also improve literacy. They're going to do a lot of writing in these science units, and we're citing evidence. So there's a lot of reading literacy embedded into these science units. All right, let me get back to the PowerPoint here. I still call it PowerPoint even though this slide.
Yeah.
World before Google.
All right, so what we're going to do, so the objectives for today is we're going to go through some of the standards and kind of explain what a lot of the terminology means. PEs, again, a lot of acronyms. We're going to talk about the clues chart, which we have up here, and talk about how to use that, talk about productive talk. We're going to touch on that. There is going to be more professional development on that the week we come back before school. The 5 E's, how to access the units in Atlas Rubicon, and then what science in the K through 5 classroom looks like. We're going to do a walk through the first unit, which is about Earth systems. And so here we have the 3-dimensional learning of that is the foundation of the next generation science standards. This SEP stands for Science and Engineering Practices. The behaviors that scientists engage in as they investigate and build models and theories about the natural world, and the key set of engineering practices that engineers use as they design and build models and systems. So it's like how they do it. The disciplinary core ideas are the key organizing concepts, the problem-solving tools, and the underlying principles of discipline. What are they performance? What are they learning? And then the cross-cutting concepts are the underlying themes that have value in the big ideas, basically. So we're gonna. What does this mean? We're gonna show you an example. This is from 3rd grade. Do you know how to make this bigger, Rick?
Just drag, I think you can drag the whole box up.
Okay, so for third grade weather and climate, the performance, these are the performance expectations, that this is what they're actually doing in the unit. Representing data, combining information to describe climate, making a claim about the design solution that reduces the impact of a weather-related hazard. Now, how they're doing it, they're analyzing data, they're engaging in arguments. These are the disciplinary core ideas, weather and climate. They record the patterns. They describe the range, climate describes the range of the area. This is what they have to do. And then the patterns, learning about cause and effect. Again, these are the big ideas. So those are the 3 dimensions of everything in the unit. This is like foundation.
That's like they all intertwine with each other to get the whole concept across, I guess you could say.
And every lesson has these 3 components to it, yes.
So would this be similar to what it looks like in Rubicon, or is this what it looks like in NGSS? Or this is not any?
Inside the lessons, I would say it's broken down.
Okay,
It
but it
covers
doesn't
all
look
these.
in this
Right,
format.
it's not gonna
Okay.
be in that,
Yeah.
that
Good deal,
format.
but all of it'll be there, good.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
The other component of these units are kind of like the way we introduce things to the kids is the 5 E's. And they're engage, explore, explain, elaborate, and evaluate. So every lesson fits one of these 5 E's. This is a little bit more in depth of what each one of them means. So engage is a lot of the lessons at the beginning of the unit is to get kids excited and capturing interest. And then exploring, kind of digging a little bit deeper. Elaborating is even deeper. Then explain, like how did, taking what they've learned and constructing new knowledge out of that. And then evaluate is doing it on your own and showing how you understand the facts. So again, the 3 dimensions are the disciplinary core ideas are what they know, the cross-cutting concepts are how they're thinking, and then the science and engineering practices are what they're doing. What's happening, what's the problem, and every unit is broken down into learning sets. We'll talk about this a little bit more. And each learning set each unit has a big question, then each learning set has a question, and each lesson has a question that they're trying to answer. The science and engineering practices are kind of, again, those big ideas. What are you wondering about? What do you think? How are you going to investigate your wonderings? And how do you know the answer to the question? And then it's more, the cross-cutting concepts are those big ideas like patterns and cause and effect. I think patterns comes up a lot before for whatever reason. Okay, so now how are we doing this? Making thinking visible is one of the components is productive talk. So before at the end of last school year, I took some of the stuff from the first unit and did it with some of my students, with my class. So I would have this video about productive talk. I'm going to say, like, you know how a lot of times when you're in PD and there are videos that you're like, wow, how's that really, this is a real classroom, I can tell you that. And it's also like, lesson was like the first Monday in June, so just keep that in mind when you're watching it. But I loved it because it did show like how far the kids have come about talking about science. It's not all perfect because there's a lot of kids not on task. G, fossil G. What do you think this might be? Hold on, we're gonna pause that. Aiden, what did you just say?
I think it's.
Oh wait, here it is. Okay. Yeah, but what's it? So they're looking at fossil. They're looking at a fossil, pictures of a fossil, and trying to determine what it says about where the picture rocks National Lake Shore.
a bone, because it's like, I don't know, like the holes could be like where veins are.
Okay.
Something like that.
And what else makes you think it's a bone? Think it's a bone though?
It kind of looks like the shape of one.
Looks like the shape of a bone. Auden, what do you think?
My first assumption was cheesecake because there's holes in it and it's big. But it kind of looks.
So you've adjusted your assumption because you realize that doesn't make sense.
Yes. So it kind of looks like a piece of rock falling, like a piece of rock fell of the volcanic ash.
Okay, maybe. Maddie, what do you think?
When I first saw it, I saw the holes in it, and it kind of looks like a strawberry, like up close. But then on the top, it kind of looks like a rock.
Okay. Nathan, what do you think?
I think it might be a rock or like a glacier.
Okay. Why do you think that?
I don't know.
Okay. Remember, we're trying to support our thoughts with evidence. Connor, what do you think?
Well, you can't really tell because it's not in color.
Okay. So you would like pictures in color?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that might be something we write as questions. What is the color of this object? It definitely looks like white, but we're not 100% sure. Elena, what do you think?
Okay, so the first thing when I saw it, like, it kind of looked like a little leftover piece of fish or like salmon.
I don't see that. What's your evidence?
Leah just became Miss Ravus and asked you what your evidence
Yeah,
was.
that's awesome.
That's why I didn't look at it first.
That's what you thought of. Rocco, what do you think?
When I first saw it, it looked like a mattress on the side, and then on the top it looked like kind of like a rock. And then
What's your
So something made those holes and they look very,
You know what? It could be like a bone or something, and then a whale's teeth went like poke through it.
A whale could have
Kai, what do you think?
into the lake.
I kind of think this is the first thing that came to mind is those big circle things of cheese.
It does look a little bit like cheese. I'm not gonna lie.
With pencil marks in it.
But it has marks in it. Mitch, what do you think?
No, it's not cheese.
That whales cheese came into the lake and then they hit them out and
Again, we need to know the size. Molly?
I am writing that down.
I couldn't hear Molly. So you think the holes are teeth marks? Davis?
I think it might be a log that like stuff nest into it.
Okay. And that's what you think the holes are?
Yeah, like stuff, like something like burrowed into the log.
Okay. And okay. Okay, so they're really engaged in the topic, and some of their ideas are crazy, but they're getting better, and they were challenging each other about like how what's your evidence? Yeah, because this is like one of the last few lessons in the first learning set. I said, "What's your evidence?" like so many times. My class was like repeating me. So, that's kind of what we're going for. And they were really like, I have to say, they were really super engaged in this unit. And I think the units are pretty engaging for students, more so than what we've been working on. There's a lot of modeling in these units. So here's an example of a water cycle. That's not from a 4th grade unit, but I think it might be younger. And then the clues chart. So we are going to talk a little bit about how the clues chart can make our thinking visible. So we have, does everybody have their clues chart? So again, we're just reviewing what this looks like. The K stands for what you think you know. L for what you're learning, things that goes on. The evidence that supports what you are learning, what wonderings or questions you have, and the key concepts and vocabulary. So this is something that should be up in your classroom and being constantly revisited through throughout the science units. We're going to show some examples of how you can use it in other subject areas. And just remember that it's non-linear. You're going to kind of go all over, and it's not, it doesn't always look pretty.
Right, and you do a lot of like revisiting and erasing and taking things away and having the kids like visually seeing what their work is. I know that, I think it's coming up, but I'll say it anyways. I don't have a spot in my classroom for mine, so I bring it out when I need it and take it back down, so I have it on my whiteboard, and it stays on there, everything stays on, and the kids really like to see what they do. It also gives them a reminder of what we talked about, so that's really the whole point of that.
And I know some teachers use an electronic version of it. I think that sometimes is easier, because it is a big chart.
A lot of people I know have sliced the 5 categories.
Yeah, that's
and
another
have
thing you
to-
can do.
Yeah.
So again, here's an example that a teacher used for talking about the Underground Railroad. So the question is, should we say or should we escape? And then things that they think they know, and when they're learning about the Underground Railroad, this is what the teacher used.
I say the messier it is, the better
Yeah.
it is. Right?
And then it's also for setting up the community in your classroom. What does it mean to be a responsible member of a group? It's use the book and you memorize. This is not my chart. Whoever did, a teacher used this.
These are examples.
But again, you can see what they know about how to be a responsible member, what they learned, and the evidence from the text. Here's just some more examples, like some teachers, especially probably at the younger levels, use more like pictures. All right, we're gonna stop there. That worked fast. But I think the second part is the bigger part of what we're talking about. So we're gonna take a break here for people to go shopping in the book room. Cool.
So those are our units that.
Those are your, these are
Yeah,
the
these are the 4th grade units.
Okay.
1 and 2
Approve the rest.
copies. Oh, wait, can you go back? Oh, sure.
Sorry.
Now, I see that it's 4 units, and we have 3 trimesters, so I'm thinking you're gonna not take the whole, you gotta kind of play.
Yeah, when we go to Rubicon Atlas, I'll show you the unit calendars.
Okay.
The energy unit is really long.
Yeah,
It's
It's the biggest one.
It's the big one.
okay.
And it's a trial error, like it's a trial year, so getting through all of them will probably not happen.
Right.
Now, will the, report card match at all?
We didn't get that far to, we're hoping that eventually it will, but we're not exactly sure on that.
When she.
Tanya? Steven?
When they went around to buildings, I overheard, they said, yep, we're on it, we're gonna do it, so.
Yay.
Well, otherwise, it's gonna seem a little funky town, they're gonna have to, really.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
I think I heard that our entire report card is changing, because we're no longer going to do letter grades.
Right.
Yes.
So I think that,
This year?
yeah,
So if they're restructuring it,
Really?
it would probably get on that too.
reflect it, yeah.
We're gonna be an open document that continuously changes. I would assume that it's gonna match, gonna evolve at the same page.
Because those are individual stands, they're gonna be.
Right.
listed
And the other thing is this is the order in which we are doing them. We're not doing the kits from the company anymore. Everybody is going to get their own materials.
Well, you can see the little tub in the corner, it's not a little tub, but we're gonna try to, the whole vision is to have all the materials in the building and everybody teaches the same thing at the same time, so that when kids bounce from, if they move, right now we get kids that come in and, oh, I already did that, they're already,
Right.
now that's supposed to not happen. So,
So the vision is like one big tub for your classroom with, like, they were imagining those giant, like, Ziploc bags with each stuff from individual units, but
We have not seen how that's gonna look yet, but we do know that we're gonna have everything.
we did put together pretty extensive material list. There's not a lot of things that you're gonna have to,
Right, as long
You're not gonna
as the
describe
budget
them.
allows, we still, I mean, we put everything in there. I mean, if you need the paper clips, I put it on there just because I didn't want new teachers coming in saying, I don't have any of this stuff, so we try to put everything that you would need for science there. So, I know it's gonna be a lot of organization the first time. I'm planning on having my whole cover just kind of section in units and put the stuff I need in there and use the tubs for some of the non-perishable things or the non-reusable things.
and we'll talk about this a little bit more. There are some things, like food related.
Yes.
That.
I do have one more question.
Sure.
Maybe I was totally out of the loop. I knew they were talking about no grades. Is fifth grades also dropping no grades?
Right, 'cause that's the way I understood it.
Yeah.
Wow.
So they won't get a letter for each of us.
And that's gonna be a rude awakening.
Yeah, will be, but it'll be really cool because it'll be line directed to the standards, so it'll be so easy. So if you don't finish in one card marking, you can still continue on
Mhm.
with the grading process. So this
Yeah.
kind of works out.
I think we'll
We'll
like
have
that.
real discussions about kids.
Did you have a question?
No. You'll have real discussions about kids though, and what,
Right.
not so grade center. And I think we're gonna have to train parents who have
Yeah.
kids.
Oh, definitely.
Definitely.
Right?
Definitely.
But if they're new, they're like, okay.
Yeah.
Their first kid, all right.
Right.
Okay.
So, some notes about the units. If we're gonna take a look at Rubicon Atlas, and this will be a time that you can get your laptops out and go to Rubicon Atlas too, if you know how to
See the
access it.
overview and.
But we'll show you, if you have, John and I we've been working this whole school year, several times throughout the school year, and then a week after school got out. We've looked at them a number of times. I'm sure there's still mistakes. So if you see something or something doesn't make sense, or if you have an idea about something, please let one of us know. We can work on adding it to the unit. It's kind of the expectation that part of your PLCs and we'll have ongoing professional development on these science units, because we know it's a big shift in how we've done science in the past, from how we've done science in the past.
And I think we completely understand the frustration. I mean, to be honest, when we first started this, we were wondering how we're going to do this and how are we gonna be responsible for making all you guys do what we did? So, anything that comes up, if you see errors, if you have suggestions, I mean, let us know. It's a work in progress.
It's definitely, and this is definitely, it's almost like a pilot year for the whole
Yeah.
district. That they do not expect perfection. I don't think you ever expect perfection when you're teaching anything, but, they don't expect mastery of these
Right.
teaching or teaching.
More like
Something, it's a work in progress. Cindy, did you have a question?
Well, just to make sure, because I'm not using my normal thing, the best way to get to PCCS is Rubicon. On this one, just school district data.
I would go to the.
I think
school
if you go to the
district website.
PCCS website and the staff, there's a link to Rubicon.
All right, PCCS.
Oh, and that thing here, throughout the units, it talks about a chart, and sometimes we tried to go back and
Yeah.
fix the clues chart, but the units, we were getting a lot of the lessons from, referred to it as a class chart or communication chart or something. So whenever it's a chart, we're meaning the clues chart.
Did not come up.
I'm sorry, I'm reading the agenda. This is
Oh.
It's a place where there's two lessons daily.
I didn't see the resources on there. What's that big lump? Yeah, that's energy.
Yeah.
But it's, I think
I
it's,
like it, yeah.
we really, at first we were looking at these units and we're like, oh, but then once we really, and especially once I started teaching some of the lessons with students, I was like, oh, this is good stuff.
Yeah, I I like where it's going. It makes kids wonder. It makes kids kind of. I think it's going to actually help them even on like M-Step and all that when you have to provide evidence for what they've read and things like that. So over time, I think we're going to see some improvements.
So you can see here are the 4 units. Earth and its layers are basically the first 2 months. And as you can see, like I said, energy is huge. It goes from November through February. And then you can see these orange lines are when the trimesters are, trimester dates are. So you can see that there is overlap with the ideal situation. Now, obviously, these lessons take, especially for the first year we're doing them, it's gonna take a lot longer, and we might not even get to serve some.
Right.
So when you go into each unit, you can see all the standards, all of the practices are there, the big ideas, big questions. There's learning targets if you need to have those posted in your classroom. Concepts. There's the universal design for learning. And then when you click here, there where it says lesson sequence, that's where the, is it not updated?
I might be searching in the wrong spot. You're fine, keep going.
That's where the unit is under lesson sequence, a PDF for you to access. And there's 21st century skills, and there'll be other stuff added as the year goes on.
Will you open the PDF just so I can type it?
We're gonna go into it in a minute. Yeah, we're gonna go through the first unit in depth. So what each unit looks like is this. So we have the big question of the whole unit. Then the phenomenon is what are we using to kind of grab the student's attention. The disciplinary core ideas, these are kind of like the standards. And like I said, each unit is broken up into 2 or 3 learning sets, which each has its own question. And then each lesson has its own question. Then we also have the science and engineering practices that will be covered in that unit. Each learning set has its question. We have approximate days, but that is really approximate. And then each lesson is set up like this, where we have the big unit question, the learning set question, then what materials do you need for that lesson, what things do you have to do to prepare, and then what of the 5 E's do we hit, what is the phenomena, and then this is like the step-by-step part of the lesson. I was gonna say something, I lost it. Oh. You know how like when we first got everyday math and you were like we're just kind of like winging it, and then you realize you have to go by raisins? That's like every lesson is like that. You really have to look at the lesson before you can't especially, I mean, I don't think anybody would do that the first year, but you really can't.
And we try to do the best of telling you the lesson before to prep for a certain one, especially what we're gonna do today. There's I won't spoil it right now, but there's a lot of prep in some of these, so we try to say, remember to set this aside for tomorrow's lesson.
Yeah. So, the first unit is Earth and its layers. It talks about using evidence to support claims about how landscapes have changed in the past. The first learning set, they look at fossils and rock layers, and they make a claim or they have an opinion about how the Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore was formed. And then the second learning set, they learn about weathering and erosion through the lens of potholes. And then they use that to adjust the information that they did in the first learning set about, okay, so once they learn about weathering and erosion, how does that change their thinking about how the lakeshore was formed? So they get to look at a lot of pictures of the Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore. I will tell you, the first time I showed this picture to my students and asked them to make some suppositions about what this was, they thought it was in the middle of the ocean. So that just, and then I had to like give evidence. This is what the first lesson is actually about. All right, so
Yeah,
here.
I got it, I just am trying to play with it.
Here is the first learning set. The learning set one, the learning set question is, how do rock layers, as evidenced by Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore, develop? And then each one of these questions is its own, is each specific lesson. How do they change over time? How can investigating rock layers be used to explain how landscapes have changed? How can patterns in rock formations be used to determine age of artifacts? How can fossils be used as evidence? How can models be used to explain how landscapes have changed over time? And how do fossils help us figure out how Michigan's landscape has changed? So we're gonna actually go into the unit. So if you, you can look up here, or you can follow along on Rubicon. All right, so again, the big unit question for the Earth and its layers is, how has Earth changed over time? And we are using Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore as kind of our phenomenon that is where everything kind of revolves in this part of the lesson. This is the disciplinary core idea. These are the learning sets. Again, this kind of it's kind of important to know, but it's not like you don't need to know all this other detail. It's just there. It's what we are teaching. And then each, like I said, this unit is broken down into two learning sets. How do rock layers, as evidenced by Pictured Rock National Lakeshore, develop? And how are potholes in the roads like the formations of Pictured Rock National Lakeshore? We say 6 sessions and 8 sessions, but some of those sessions will be more than like 2 class sessions.
What is the general expectation on the amount of time and days for teachers?
And we are going to talk about
We
that
have a
towards,
slide for that.
Okay.
we are going to talk about that at the
Because
end.
sometimes it's like, sometimes I like doing, okay, I'm just doing science and getting it done, and then I'll switch to social studies. And some years I've done, oh, this many, you know what I'm saying? So
I
like,
think-
that's why.
I think they
just-
want you to go away from doing, I mean, I think they want science done every week. Every, you know,
And
a
social
couple times.
studies.
We are gonna talk.
We did we gave a suggestion to try to like ease some of that, but I know you can't.
Well, yeah,
do
because
that.
I've done like,
Yeah.
2 days, 3 days, alternating
That's how I've been
science and
doing it,
social,
yeah.
like, so, but I just didn't know like what
I
this
think that's,
fits.
yeah, we are gonna talk about that, but we saved that for the end, because we figured that would be
Yeah, that would probably take over the whole section.
section. All right, so learning set, again, this breaks down the performance expectations and, for each learning set. So the main practice is constructing, explanation, and designing solutions. And then the cross-cutting concepts are patterns, we're looking for patterns, and also what causes things. And these are the 4 things that they should be able to do with this learning set. Explain with evidence how patterns of the past natural hazards help scientists predict future occurrences, how fossils reveal changes, observe and describe the patterns of the location of mountain ranges, ocean trenches. We don't really get into ocean trenches. See, I've already got me good at it. And model the order in which rock layers were formed. So, like I said, each lesson is driving unit, the learning set, and then these are the materials that are needed for each lesson. And then if there are links to everything that you.
Yeah, so there's a lot of, it's gonna be like an interactive lesson plan instead of just printing it, so you might, if you end up printing it, there's a lot of links that you won't be able to get to unless you have it pulled up, so, especially in the material, we put most of those.
The links are all in the
That
materials.
you need for that lesson, that's why I think if you just wing it, you're gonna be like, where is this, because there's a lot of links to things, there's a lot of videos, a lot of, students do a lot of explaining or thinking what they saw first.
Yeah, so that's another thing, they have to have a notebook
Yeah.
that they are tracking their thinking in. However you wanna organize that, some people like doing it electronically, some people like having the written notebook. But they are doing a lot of charts and thinking and
Putting their thoughts down.
putting their thoughts down, and then also constructing responses.
Sorry for all the questions. So since you've kind of done it, what do you feel might be best, or is there not really a best, like, one notebook for the whole year, or just say, okay, here's a notebook for unit 1, or for all the, earth thing, and then keep it out?
That's a really good question.
Yeah.
But I
I just
think,
didn't know,
I think
like, what
with
you
all the
think.
writing that we're supposed to do, I think you're gonna fill up a notebook within, by the half of the year, I would think. 'Cause
Okay.
they're supposed to be drawing models of their thinking, they're supposed to write down, there's a lot of lessons where they just write down, what do you see? And they have to write it down and then share it.
Right.
So it's kind of like the writer's
So you could
workshop.
almost put together something and like, okay, this is our earth one, we're done with it, brand new notebook or,
And I think that's what it'll come down to, like teacher preference of how you
Okay.
wanna do it. I think
Right.
it'd be, we were trying to do it at Miller, trying to figure out, we don't wanna ask for 6 notebooks.
Right.
for Parents, so we asked for 2 and we'll figure it out from there. I have a whole drawer full of
Right,
extra
right.
ones, so.
2 questions now. I thought the district was providing us notebooks.
We
I have
do
not
not
heard that.
have, we weren't told that, so.
I didn't hear the question.
Oh, say it again, you said that.
I thought that the district was ordering us notebooks. I thought Deb said that.
And I think it's going,
Maybe
it
I
could
made
be the school, your principal funds too, sometimes, but I know at Miller, we were talking about maybe
Right.
making an order for the first time, but I don't know if that's been set in stone or anything.
I
like
swore
that.
Deb said that she was ordering them with the rest of our science supplies, but who knows?
I don't
Second
know.
question.
Yeah,
We'll
ask.
we'll find.
The PDF, the links aren't, I know you're viewing this in Google Docs, but it's uploaded on Atlas as a PDF and the links aren't.
The links aren't working,
Clickable.
because they worked for me, so
It
It
is,
did work for
it
me.
does look
Mine
different
just
in there,
took a
it's just one, it's a PDF thing, so I don't know if it,
So
has it been uploaded,
So
or
for
has it just been
second
uploaded for
grade?
our viewing right now?
So
That's
for
what I'm-
second grade, we uploaded ours, literally on Atlas, you can like click to upload it from Google Drive, and we put it in there,
Alright, we'll make sure it works by the time.
Yeah, cause I think I know what you're talking, cause right now I'm just
Yeah.
getting it in a window.
Yes.
And
Yeah,
it
that's
should
how mine
flow
is.
like the reading and writing ones do, and it's not.
Okay, we'll make sure that work.
Like that should be a link I can click on, right, but I can't.
Okay.
It just took time.
but your links are clickable?
That link worked, but now I'm also on a Apple, whatever
Okay.
that
So I'm wondering if
Which
it has,
page-
did
which
you
page is
upload it
that?
from there?
Yeah.
I wonder if it has.
That's
something to do
page
with that.
6, I think.
Where it said in
Oh, I-
page 4, engage picture racks.
We'll make
Oh,
sure
I'm sorry.
it
I
is,
moved forward on it.
We'll double check that.
we'll make
sure
it
that
work,
you can
we'll
get
make
it.
sure it works. Okay, so, and we also,
Engaged in the, yes.
so decide if you want students to view on picture on Chromebooks or display on smartboards. When I did this lesson, I pushed it out to my students so they could have the pictures on their Chromebooks, but it's really preference. Science teams, and then each lesson has a purpose or claim. That the purpose for this lesson is to identify evidence or patterns or observations to support an explanation for changes that have occurred over time, and that the claim is that characteristics of rock formations provide evidence for how landscapes have changed. And then this is where like the actual meat of the lesson is. There's the question, and this is an engagement, we're just engaging the students in what we're talking about. The step-by-step of what we do. So the first thing we talk about, we're gonna figure out ways landscapes have changed over time. They had some knowledge of this because they learned a little bit about rocks and fossils in 3rd grade. No, I don't think they're doing that anymore. So this first year will be the first time they have, maybe have some background knowledge about rocks and fossils. Because I don't think they touch on it in 3rd
Yeah, I'm not sure, I don't think.
anymore. And then you'll show the slide And I'm just gonna read through it and then we'll kind of show you the slides and talk about what the kids saw. Asked if they seen a rock formation. Like I said, my kids thought it was the middle of the ocean. And then, but then one kid goes, maybe that looks a little bit like up north. I'm like, oh, and then they started talking. And then once you said there's pictured rocks, National Lakeshore, they're like, oh, yeah. And then we talked about how this is like, they're going to be using this throughout the unit. And then there's a whole slideshow. I think there's 10 different pictures. And they went through and they got in their teams and they made observations in their notebook about each slide. And again, you're always reminding them to show evidence, support their thinking with specific things that they saw in the picture. And then you give them, after they've done that, and you've had a little bit of discussion about it, you give them a paper to make a poster. And they are creating an initial explanatory model about how the rock formations they observed were formed. Remind students to use text, pictures, shapes, and symbols while creating their models. Prompt students to include the patterns they observed inside the rock formations as well as the shapes of the landscapes in their initial model. And they use it again at the end of the second learning set. They're going to compare. And then the students, you put them up around the room and students walk around and kind of make observations. You can post-it notes, they can ask questions. And then there's the individual response. So each lesson tries to have something at the end where students do an individual response. So they look at photo 9 and they just individually respond to the prompt in their notebook. Based on your model, what changes do you predict will help happen to this rock formation over time? And what do you think might cause these changes? And then we're taking those and adding those charts. So let me go back to the slides and show you what they're looking at.
Okay, I have another question.
Yep.
So I know how we always, how you usually put the question on there.
Mhm.
Do you put the question for the whole unit or for each lesson? Do you know what I'm saying? Because like, there's so
I
many
would say for each
questions.
learning set. So there's the big question, which is the whole unit, but each learning set is
So like the,
so
Whatever you
learning
do
set
that day,
1
yeah.
would be
Okay.
like,
I would probably like have
Right,
another thing
no.
above it to
Okay.
say like, this is what we
but
want
you
to
don't
get back to.
I mean, because you can't redo it for every day.
No.
So like, okay.
No, and each learning set is pretty thematic in how, like, they're pretty tight
So would you
thematically.
wipe it for the next learning set then? Like if you do the big question for learning set 1 and you've got all of your,
Well, for example, we're gonna get into
Oh,
learning
that's
set
good.
2 is a lot of what they already learned from this one. So it's a continuation, so there's
I would say
probably
for that,
parts of it, yes,
But for like the energy unit,
Right.
it's like 3 pretty discrete topics.
So possibly at each set, you would.
Yeah.
And I saw.
And then take a picture,
Yeah,
just
you could take a
You can
picture
take
and give it
pictures,
to
roll
them.
one and keep a running,
Right.
like I'm thinking through it as you're talking about it.
Right.
Okay.
Keep a
I just
running
wanna
list
make
of
sure
this
we
is our
weren't-
first one and then.
Yeah, I
this
mean,
is
I
the second
have not mastered that chart yet. So
Yeah, neither have I.
do you
sometimes
just
it's-
anticipate like you'll fill that up in just learning set 1?
I guess I would say it depends on your class, how much you're into it and what they're asking and I find that what do you know, they like to list a bunch of stuff. So you can kind of add, so you don't have to add everything. And then continue, what are we learning, maybe that's next day, hey, what did we learn the next day? Cause I don't see it being, getting back to that every lesson, especially this first time, because you'll probably be, by the time you're almost done, that whole hour is gonna be gone, so getting back to the next day to add to that.
Okay.
So this is the slideshow that they're gonna be looking at. There's a, and, we students like talk about why the difference in color, and what was their evidence for why the different colors, than like the holes.
So Mary Beth, when you say what was their evidence, are they they're searching for that evidence?
No, it
And
was,
it's a tricky
because
thing
this
to
is the
say.
first lesson, they kind of just,
Right.
what were they thinking, what caused it, and then as the lessons go on, they build on their knowledge.
It's kind of like going back to her video, it's just getting ownership from the class, just saying, what do you think is happening?
What are
here?
the
And-
possible,
Like
what
the
do you think are the
holes,
possibilities?
in.
Yeah.
Yeah,
There's-
why is it different colors?
And
What would make sense?
There's
Why do you
nothing in
think-
these lessons that are like, this is the one answer,
Yes.
which was like, it was hard for me to like, oh, there's no one way, like they could totally like,
And that's what I like about these lessons, because it's just like what we do every day. We're always.
and it's what
looking
real
at a
scientists
problem,
do too.
And you have to solve it, and there's not a right answer. You can solve different things. I mean, think about our computers. There's all kinds of different ways you can solve the same problem, right?
Yes.
So again, here, there's like, I think they said there's 10 slides, and this one had a lot of this, with my class, had a lot of discussion because they're like, what causes this? And, you know, some of their ideas were like cheesecake, and some of them were like,
Yeah.
you know, based in really scientific ideas. Okay, so that's the first lesson. I'll be honest with you, it said one class session, it took me 3, the first year. The first time I did it. We took one session just to look at the slides and to make their notebooks and to, you know, to make their observations. It took one lesson to do the poster, and then it took one lesson to do the gallery walk.
Well, just even setting up your notebooks at the beginning of the year.
Exactly.
What you want, yeah.
And trying to get
Well,
what
just
you
even
want.
routines,
Right.
like,
Yep.
you know, like, I mean, getting them, like this is how it's gonna go.
Are we teaching how the rock layers were formed to begin with, or just how they're revealed in weathering?
See, like, this whole process it's gonna be hard for a lot of teachers, because we are so used to saying, this is the way it is. It's no longer like that, it's investigating. They have to figure out why it's happening. So they look at it, and it's not like a set answer.
The basic gist of what they're gonna get in this first learning set is that the oldest rock layers are at the bottom, and that that there's the pressure kind of compacts things, and that fossils in the different layers tell us about the time period in which those layers were formed.
And I think that the answer to your question is gonna come from all the questions that you asked the class, and all the experiments, and all the modeling that you do and that you do to be able to explain what that phenomenon is that's going on.
It's kind of cool because that's what they're doing with glaciers when they go down and take those core samples of glaciers.
Especially like when we get to the pothole, the whole pothole thing, they have to figure out why are these really happening, what caused it, and they do experiments that I'll show you in the, or explain, that explains that, and I love that one just because you see them everywhere, you know?
Yeah, right.
So,
It's something they can really connect to.
yeah.
And their parents.
Yeah, they can go home and tell them how to fix it, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Maybe this will develop better roads.
Or just this is what.
So that's the first lesson. The next lesson is, again, we have our questions and then we have our materials. Now, you're like probably going to the materials and like, why do we need a laundry basket and why do we need clothes?
Yes.
All right, so you're like, but we are giving, I believe we are giving you the laundry basket.
Yeah, the laundry, and we put it on the
We
list.
put it on the list.
So hopefully we.
So what this lesson is, and if you look at the teacher preparation, prepare a story about your laundry basket. Collect sets of clothing that will match the story's activities. And basically, you're bringing in a laundry basket, and you're like, okay, so I had, this is my laundry. Obviously, not your real laundry basket because you know your kids like looking
Look for lost and found. Call
But
it a
just
day.
so
There you go.
on Thursday, I got up and went to the gym. So at the bottom were like gym clothes, and then you know, outfit for work, and then so you have like 5 outfits, and in one of the outfits you have like a wrapper of some sort. So they can, that's kind of like the fossil. So this is the laundry basket geology model.
I can see it with a new mom. And then my daughter threw up on it.
Yep.
And she had just eaten carrots. That's on the bottom.
So yeah, so show the class, before you get in the story, you have to ask them, well, how about we use this basket as evidence for what I did each day during the past week? And they kind of give their ideas. And then you kind of tell your story. Last Thursday morning, I woke up and got for school pajamas, the gym clothes, got ready for school, and then they kind of talk. Then after you've gone through that story is, where would you find the clothes I wore yesterday to school? On top. Where would I find the clothes I wore earlier in the week? On the bottom. If I find a candy wrapper in the pocket of my gym clothes, which day of the week do you think I ate the candy? What evidence do you have to support your statement?
I love it when that.
And then you bring them back to the Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore and how, and have them start thinking about in their teams, but how the laundry basket is like the Pictured Rocks National Lakeshore.
I love the fact of the candy wrapper, because when you say fossils, kids automatically think a piece of rock, a bone. They don't think that it can be an impression of a leaf or anything else that tells something about what happened. Yeah.
And again, I mean, it does say this, it's just a suggestion, it's not something that we had a hard time actually putting that in there, just to.
You do not have to say this word for word.
Exactly word
But
for
I
word.
like it gives us an idea.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
And then, again, so after they talk about it in their teams, we talk about a whole class, and then they write in their science notebooks, how is your laundry basket model in the Pictured Rock National Lakeshore poster similar, different? Is there anything one model will allow you to explain that the other doesn't? So that's, again, exploring, kind of digging a little bit deeper, and have them thinking about the oldest is the bottom layer, and working up, and that fossils could tell us where and what time period something takes place. All right, we're ready for my favorite. This next lesson,
Yeah, this,
John's probably so sick of hearing about it, but I was obsessed with how to make this work. And
I don't think it was, I think it's Deb and those guys are tired of us.
So that is kind of a group, like a big model, and now we're gonna come and give them a different model that will help them understand a little bit more and go a little bit more in depth. It's called cupcake geology. So I understand that making cupcakes, according to the way this lesson goes, is not feasible for every class and not feasible for everybody to do. So I included some other examples of things that you could do. It's more having their, so that laundry basket is one model for the whole class. This is more having an individual model for themselves to have it to work with. So like I said, I was really stressing about like cupcakes. How are we gonna do this? Is it gonna work? Why? But once I did it with my kids really enjoyed it and really it made sense to them. So, and I think we ordered a lot of we put it on a materials list, I'm not sure.
Yeah, we tried with materials, we tried to make it simple for everybody so that nobody did like a panic thing,
Yeah.
but.
And so a lot of the, you're gonna need cake mix, food coloring, chocolate chips, foil baking cups, and chocolate frosting. When you're making the cupcakes, you're using white cake mix, and when you're making the batter, you separate it in 3 bowls and use the food coloring. You have 3 different colors, and then each.
Don't forget the chocolate chips on the bottom.
And then the chocolate chips are on the bottom layer, and those represent fossils.
So we're making this with the class. We don't make it at home and bring it.
No, you make it at home and bring it in. The kids don't know. That's why I know not everybody.
Well, okay, that's what I was like. I'm like.
Not everybody's going to do.
I think
I
they fixed that up
totally
in
understand
our
that not
school.
everybody's going to do this, and not everybody with
we-
allergy issues, and I understand that, but
We looked at this one, I think this is the biggest elaborate one that we really have to do.
for this.
So, we looked.
The original lesson had a more complicated. They had a cake, but it was a cake. You had to make 4-layer cake and put pasta noodles and dog food
Yeah.
and things and to simulate the fossils. And I was just like, you can't do a cake and not have a payoff for the kids where they can eat the cupcake or eat.
I'm sure somebody would.
Somebody could, but if you want, the layered cake model is probably more scientifically accurate because there's different things in it, but it was a way more I mean, and I love to bake, it was way more than I wanted to put effort into. And I thought the cupcake at least can have it at the end. But we also have like a Lego
Yeah, we put multiple things in there. So
pudding cups and
reach
then
everybody.
Earth Slayer Spice Jar, I think that's using Play-Doh. Just so they have their own kind of model for themselves. So if you do the cupcakes, when I did it with my kids, I'm like, oh, I see why this is.
Yeah, they really need, I mean, it's a lot to think about or take in right now. I mean, especially when I read it, like I got a bake a thing of cupcakes for my class and I wanted to be out. But when they actually have it right there and they're actually doing the core, there's a lot more meaning to it.
So basically the way this lesson goes, we're gonna actually do this in a little bit. Got cupcakes. We're gonna use another model to help us figure out. We're gonna talk about, again, how would a scientist investigate patterns in the rocks underneath this area? And this is where I had actually some good discussions with the kids, and they tied it into, I'm like, what tools do you think scientists use to study rocks? They're like, oh, they had a lot of knowledge because of Minecraft and Fortnite, all those, they had some knowledge about what those tools were. And then give them the cupcake, and you have to use foil wrappers because they're not supposed to see inside at first. Because real scientists can't see the inside of the rock at first. And then the chocolate frosting represents the soil. And then talk about how could you find out what was inside without destroying it. Take those ideas, and then we use straws to take a sample. And you take the straw into the cupcake and kind of twist it and pull it out, and it pulls out a little piece of it. And that's where the kids saw the layers.
So kind of like the core.
Right.
Yeah.
Sample.
Taking it
Yep,
course.
we're gonna do it in a minute. And then there is a data table where they can record their data, and then there is chocolate chips in the bottom, so that kind of represents the fossils. And some kids, when they did their sample, they got part of the chocolate chip, and some kids didn't. And some kids, the layers aren't perfectly even, so they're like, oh, I only got 2 colors, but some kids got 3 colors, and so there was really good discussion about what they got. And then you talk about which of the artifacts do you think is the oldest? What evidence do you have to support your claim? Again, they're going back to their laundry basket model. Oh, that's the